Hello and welcome to the Kinfolk Chat podcast. My name is Erica, and in this podcast, we're going to talk about genealogy, DNA, culture, and just plain old people. So thanks for tuning in. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's get started. So I'm here on a nice afternoon with some really good girlfriends, and we are talking about our food experiences from childhood to adulthood. And I'm going to go ahead and start with one. She is actually from the north, so she's from the Boston area. So we're going to talk to her. She's African American. We're going to talk to her about her experience as a child and how she experienced food growing up.
Okay, so growing up, I would say that my palate wasn't really extensive, only because my grandmother raised me and she was a health nut when I was in her care. So a lot of what she ate was just super healthy, not a lot of salt, not a lot of not a lot of seasonings, because she went from her old school Southern ways to eating a lot healthier. She worked with a nutritionist, like she did the whole 9 yards. So a lot of my food was either baked or steamed, and there wasn't that much of a selection. I couldn't really have junk food growing up. So I would say that translates my current life. My palate's more extensive because I wanted to try new things and really understand how food can be flavored, how it can be cooked in various ways. So I would say as of right now, my palate's more extensive just because of what I went through.
So if I were to ask you basically what kinds of meals exactly your grandmother made, what would be one that's most memorable?
I would say the most memorable that she would make is probably like she would do like a baked cod, and then on the side she would have like some veggies and then some brown rice. It was really simple, but it was something that we had like a lot.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you. And you said cod because that's popular in the Northeast.
Huge one, yeah.
Very popular. So that is a part of her food story, and that lets you know a lot about the general region where she was pretty much born and raised. Yeah. So that speaks a lot. Thank you for that. This next woman is a woman of all trades. She is someone who is from the DC metro area, and she actually does a lot. So it'll be interesting to find out what the northern Southerners were eating when they were growing up. So I would like for you again to tell me, what was your food experience like growing up as a child?
Well, my food experience growing up as a child was more Southern, actually. We'll say Southern, but country. My family came from Virginia, Lovingston, Virginia, where, you know, they had the mountains and the cows and the chickens. So when my mom, was moved up to Washington, D.C., that culture, came with her. So we ate a lot of fried chicken, fried fish, potato salad, greens, ham. But as I, matured, I was introduced to a lot of different foods, different cultures. I married a Jamaican, so I learned, the culture of the Caribbean foods. And me trying to change my diet, eat healthier. Now I'm not eating meat, just eating, seafood and much healthier choices, a lot of vegetables, less starch, less sugar, no sodas, no juices, where I feel better, health-wise. So we went to a lot of unhealthy food to now making a lot of healthy choices. So
perfect. And you know what's so interesting about that experience is that she said Virginia. To us Southerners, true Southerners, deep South Southerners like Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, we feel like Virginia is north. So that's the interesting thing. When you go north, well, under the Mason-Dixon line, You have a lot of these states like Delaware and Washington, D.C., Virginia, that are still geographically north, because I call it northern because they have snow. And in the South, we get very, very little snow. So agricultural lifestyles are more found in the deep South, whereas Virginia was known for its tobacco fields. They did have a lot of slavery. Actually, that's where the slaves were sold, out of some of those areas. So they do have a rich history as it relates to African American life. Okay, so this last person is really interesting because she has a very random and deep palate when it comes to food. She likes French food. She likes Spanish food. She likes all things food. She's a Kentucky native, right? Family is from Georgia. So mother's side is from the deep South. Father's side is from Pennsylvania. So she has a mixture of northern and southern. So let's go ahead and hear from her about her experience growing up and her cultural palette.
So my cultural palette is a little bit different. I learned all of my different cultures of food from my grandmother. You know, her home cooking. She's from Georgia, Macon, Georgia. So, you know, from the stuffings to the homemade gravies and, you know, the chicken livers and all of those different parts. I learned all that from her. So I started young with a different palette of tasting different foods. So when I got older, I started being more adventurous and trying different, like sushis and French food and more things outside of my box that I wasn't introduced to as a younger child. So culturally, that's where I came from. My father's side of the family was the same way with the Southern cooking, even though they were from Pennsylvania. But a lot of my culinary, I contribute to my grandmother and opening my eyes to different foods.
I also want to add that with my experience growing up, I've learned to appreciate different foods as well. Like I appreciate certain, I guess foods you would say health foods. So when it came to certain trends happening, like people getting into like things like quinoa or, you know, any type of like vegetable that wasn't really known, like cauliflower, I've already been exposed to those things. So I just kind of was like, oh, I already know about this. And so growing up with a woman who really wanted to improve her health, it really helps you to kind of like see through the lens of really eating food that improves your health as well. But I also will say that my cultural palette has extended to like other regions and other cuisines, like Indian food, sushi, just a handful of different foods, French food, everything. So it has extended as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, ladies. We appreciate your contribution to this project, and it is actually eye-opening as I hang out with you ladies, but I was unaware of some of your cultural roots, although I knew a little bit about it, but I see how it impacts your choices of meals and the way that you eat today. So thank you all so much for this, and thank you all so much for listening to this podcast.